moving into October, things started picking up again. I actually read 12 books this month with an average rating of 4.25 and an average page count of 446 pages, which comes out to 173 pages per day. The Tropic of Serpents and the Voyage of the Basilisks are part of the Lady Trent books memoirs. So like I said, I loved each one more than the last. I fell in love with the character and the characters in the world from the start, but really book 3, Voyage of the Basilisk is where I really started getting invested. These are great books. I read all 3 books in the Broken Earth trilogy. There will be a full review for that soon. It's filmed, I just haven't edited it yet, so it hasn't been uploaded. But these books are just incredible. N.K. Jemisin builds her world and builds the characters like no one else I have read. And I was just rooting for almost everyone in this book, including people that were actively working against each other. Literally, there was one character in this entire series that I wanted to see fail the entire time. I'm gonna keep those then. Well, no, I like that, make that too. That too. But it was just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Wonderful. I read the next book in the Dragon Chronicles, which is Firestar, which took the series kind of on a very sharp left turn, but also was the best book so far. I really wish I wasn't reading them all as ebooks because I would be done with them by now, but I hate reading full-length novels on ebook so much. So getting on to the rest of the books this month. There were no 1 or 2 stars, so jumping straight into the 3 stars. I read Rose Madder by Stephen King for a video that you will see sometime next year. That's not coming for a while. This is about a woman who runs away from her abusive husband, who also happens to be a cop, and tries to start a life away from him, influenced in part by this mysterious painting that she buys in a pawn shop while she's out. If it weren't for 2, relatively speaking, small things, I think this would be my favorite King I've read by far. The problems I normally have with King actually weren't bad in this. So normally I don't like the excessive use of swearing and things like that. Not that I have a problem with swearing in general, it's just the way he uses it always feels uncomfortable and unnecessary, but in this book, it fit. And like, he also puts in weird sexual content that, not just like talking about the really weird stuff, like end of it weird stuff, but just like a lot of unnecessary sexual comments. And in this one, it fit what it was there. So that was weird because it's the stuff I don't like King for, he didn't do. I liked most of the characters. I thought the abuse and the trauma caused by it were portrayed well, actually. And I thought that the supernatural elements were well done, which is one of the complaints I normally see about this book, was people didn't think it needed that supernatural twist. So the 2 issues I did have. 1, I hated having the husband's perspective in this. I think the thriller elements would have been much better without it if I didn't know what he was doing, and I just felt so gross every time I was in his head, which of course means it was written well, but like, I didn't want to read that. And then tied to this, and not exactly the same, was that I was never really sure where things like the homophobia, the racism, the ableism, the fat phobia, all of those biases, I was never really sure if they were coming from the narrative or they were coming from the perspective. And I think most of it was meant to be coming from the character's thoughts. You know, if you're in a horrible, abusive a-hole's head, they're gonna be thinking terrible things, and that's fine. But I don't know, when you have your plus-sized female character also thinking those fat-phobic things, it stops feeling like that. So I just wasn't sure on that, and that brought it all down a bit. The other one was Stormy Weather by Carl Hyacin. This will be in the same video. I just felt very ambivalent about this book. It's got a lot of different characters, and I really feel like we only needed like half of them. It was about this bad hurricane that hits Florida and what all of these different people are doing in response to this. And it lacked focus. It was all over the place, and most of it I didn't really care for. And then I had 3 4-star reads in October. Long Way Down by James Reynolds is a book told in verse about a young man whose brother has been shot and killed. I got the audiobook for this, and I actually listened to it on regular speed for once because it was just so wonderfully told. My main complaint, and it really is a very small one, is that it was too short. It had great impact as it was, and I just can't help but feel that if there had been more time to get to know the characters better, I would have gotten more out of it. But the way it was told was also just so intentional and so well done. I'm not sure I would actually like it more if he changed that. So next was One to Watch by Kate Stamen London. This is a romance about a plus-size fashion blogger who writes a scathing review of this reality dating show akin to The Bachelorette about how there's just no representation. And after this comes out, the PR, whatever, people for the show decide to ask her to be the next Bachelorette. This was a really fun, light, fluffy read for me. Trashy dating shows are one of those things that I love to watch when I'm just like feeling like crap and need to relax and just not think for a while, and this had that vibe, which is great because that's what I was looking for. My main complaint that was for a book theoretically set as a criticism of dating shows like The Bachelorette, it really missed a lot of the issues with those shows. Obviously, this was focused on representation, which is a big issue. But from what I understand, some of the non-plus size representation was iffy. But like the other things on the show, the two main red flags that were missing from this were the huge drinking culture that is encouraged by these dating shows, and then the cost to contestants to be on the show. And they were more glaring to me because the story seemed to almost be perpetuating those flaws and not criticizing them. So there was a lot of drinking in this book and no one ever commented on it. No one ever wasn't drinking. And then the other thing was that the protagonist in this is showered with free wardrobe and doesn't have access to her blog, and she doesn't really ever complain about that lack of access other than very vaguely at the beginning. But then we never get to see the other side of it, what the men feel like they're losing, because from what I understand, if you are a contestant on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, you have to provide your own clothes, and you more or less have to leave your job because you don't know how long you're going to be gone for. And I wish those elements had kind of been addressed. It just seemed like it was lacking for not including that. I did look up Simone Voice's reviews to see about the plus size representation because that's something I can't really comment on. I'll leave a couple reviews below in the description because it seems like people are kind of all over the place with it. So I'm not going to try to sum up those complexities, which aren't really things I can speak to. The other criticism, like I kind of vaguely alluded to before that I've seen, is that the representation of other things and the other representations weren't really done well. There were several characters of color where their race wasn't really ever brought up. It was mentioned once and then forgotten by the narrative, which is a fair criticism because I forgot about it until watching these reviews. So that is something to be aware of if from that side of things. Finally, in the 4-star category was Nosferatu by Joe Hill. This is a story about, let me think how to sum this up. It's about Vic, who is a young girl who has a bike that helps her find things. And it's also about this older man who has this really cool classic car that he uses to take children to Christmas land. I feel like if you're interested in horror, you should look up more details about this if you want, but I don't really want to give anything more than that away. I really, really like this. It was creepy and uncomfortable in the right way, and I'm both glad and regretful that I didn't read it in December because it would have been twice as creepy. And the characters in this were just so well written. My main complaint is the same thing you're going to hear me say for a lot of horrors and thrillers, and that's just I don't like perspectives from the villains. It was the same problem I had with Rose Madder. I want to be as unsure as our heroes of what is going on. I feel like it would scare me more. This is one, and with any book, if you're triggered, you should look up and find information. I know I had mentioned I would leave those in the description, but when I do these wrap-ups, there's just too many books to cover. But if you do check out my story graph below, I have included content warnings in all of my reviews there. And then moving on to 5 stars. I read Strange Grace by Tessa Gratton, and I loved it. I will leave a link down below to an article I read by Tessa Gratton on Tor.com. that made me want to pick up her books. And it's just a brilliant article, and I love it, and it made me want to read her books. And I'm so glad I did, because I love I love Strange Grace. I mean, absolutely adore it. And I would be surprised, there's 3 weeks left in the year. If something beats Strange Grace, it's probably going to be Nightshine. So, okay, this book. This is about a small village where the founders, called the Graces, made a deal with the devil that in exchange for sending the best of their sons, or the sons of the village, into the forest every, I think it's 13 years, the town will prosper. There will be no illnesses. If they get any injuries that happen, will heal quickly. The crops will never fail. But then at the start of the story, things are starting to go wrong. I think a cow falls sick. A woman is going into premature labor. Crops start get a blight on them. And it's way, way early for the next boy to be sent into the forest. This was so good. I literally wrote a long post on Facebook recommending this to all of my friends. So to quote from that post, "This had beautifully dark fairy tale vibes that kept me on edge. It features romantic and platonic love better and more maturely than anything I've seen before. I read this in less than a day and haven't stopped thinking about it since." I wrote that post when I read this in October, and it's still true. Anyway, I love this, and I can't wait to read literally everything Tessa Gratton has ever written. Yeah, it's just, this was good, so good. I think I really like forests, creepy forests. So moving into November, I read a whopping 17 books. To be fair, they were shorter. They had an average page count of 280 pages, which was 159 pages per day. And the books had an average rating of 3.3 stars, so meh. To kick off November, I did the 1,000 Doors Readathon in a week, which accounts for the large book count, low page count. The 5 books I read were The Haunting of Tramcar 015, Dead White Writer on the Floor, Stargazing Arcadia, and Upright Women Wanted. I had a blast. Go check out that vlog if you're interested. That was a stressful week, and I'm glad I had a lot of books to distract me from everything. So I also read that month The Eyes of the World, The Great Hunt, and Dragon Reborn for another reading vlog. No, not the books you were thinking of. Each of these were varying levels of torture for me, so please go watch that vlog so it feels like it was worth something. It should be posted already, and please make that worth it. Oops, forgot to pull this off my shelf. Also, book 4 of Lady Trent, which is probably my favorite one so far, and based on how book 5 is going, probably my favorite one forever. I also DNF'd The Rainmaker by John Grisham for my long-term project you will see sometime next year. Okay, so getting into the books I'm going to actually talk about. So we're going to start all the way at 3-star reads. The Afterlife of Holly Chase is a book about a young woman who is failed to be reformed by these 3 ghosts on Christmas Eve. And so after she dies, she must join the Scrooge Project to help reform others. I was really excited for this because I absolutely love A Christmas Carol. It has a warm place in my heart for so many reasons. My dad loves it, so we've watched so many different versions of it. Leave below in the comments your favorite adaptation for A Christmas Carol. Mine is definitely Mr. Magoo's A Christmas Carol. So good. Anyway, so I was really excited for this. I love seeing spoofs of A Christmas Carol, and then this was just kind of a letdown. I think part of it was I was getting my hope up, but I really wanted more of a focus on the Scrooge Project itself, more about the process. How do they turn ghosts? Tell me those stories. And it ended up being about a romance. Also, I found it really predictable, and not just predictable in a I know the original story, so it's easy to figure out what's going to happen way. More of, not only did I know the source they were adapting, but I also predicted every change they were going to make to the source. So, meh. Also in the 3 stars category, I'm going to put the entire Match trilogy. I keep getting ads on Facebook for the 10-year anniversary edition of Matched, And I read the first book and maybe the second book. I don't remember if I read the second book in high school. And after reading the series, I'm starting to wonder if I read the third book because there was some stuff in the third book that was familiar. And so I was like, you know what, whatever. I can spend some time reading these books. And it came out, I mean, on average, the series averaged out to 3.25 stars, so it wasn't like the worst thing I've read. It's better than Aragon. It's a YA dystopia, and the first book in particular is about this big ceremony where the citizens of this nation get paired or matched to their future romantic and life partners. And the main character, Kasia, is matched with one of her best friends, which surprises her, but then when she's watching her little card they give her to learn about the person she was matched with, another person comes up on the screen. It very much is love triangle heavy, except not, because you never expect her to pick anyone. Anyway, here's where I'm gonna kind of make people mad. While this is undoubtedly the kind of YA dystopia that came out during the post-Hunger Games hype, I actually think this has a lot more in common with a lot of classic dystopias that you probably studied in school, like The Giver and Fahrenheit 451 or Brave New World. Not in necessarily that they were incorporated well, but you could definitely see the influence, if that makes sense. The world has a lot of elements like that. Things like the pills that they have coming from Brave New World, or just so many things. One of the main ones, though, is that the main characters in this are actually kind of on the periphery of it all. Like, if you read Hunger Games, Katniss is the center of this whole movement. Or if you read Divergent, Triss is at the center of the whole thing. I thought this was interesting because these characters aren't at the center of it. They're the center of the story, and it's definitely told about them, but they really aren't the main focus of the rebellion by any means. Honestly, I think if they had squished this trilogy into one book, and not by any means, I'm not saying get rid of the romance. Read 1984. 1984 is just as much a romance as any dystopia. But honestly, if you trimmed it down, got rid of some of the fat, it'd remind me of 1984. And then moving into the 4 stars, Kingdom of Needle and Bone by Mira Grant. I was still really in the mood for creepy stuff in November, and this really delivered. It's about a pandemic that sweeps the world, and then not only is it about trying to cure this pandemic, but it's also about dealing with the long-term harms. So yeah, this probably was not the right time to read this, and I definitely would not recommend it for everyone right now, but maybe, put it on the back burner to come back to. But I really enjoyed it. I liked the way it focused in on people and the politics and not so much the disease itself, although that was definitely there. There was kind of a weird correlation they made between the anti-vax and pro-choice movements that I was not super into, but other than that, really loved this. Also in 4 stars was Jane Unlimited by Kristen Cashore. This has been on my TBR for a really long time, and I just kept putting it off because the cover is so bad, which is super shallow, but whatever. It's about Jane, who promised her great aunt that if she was ever invited to this weird, fancy, mysterious island that she would go. And then she gets invited, so she does, and then weird stuff happens. I could not possibly explain this book to you, but I really, really liked it. It was weird and confusing and really creative. It was like 4 different stories, all in a different genre, and I really liked it. The main thing that kept this a little short of 5 was that the characters were just a little too over the top, so that wasn't really my cup of tea. And I would say this book isn't going to be for everyone. A lot of the reviews you read on this is like, this author had 4 ideas that were half fleshed out, and so they put them all together instead of fleshing one of them out for a full story. I don't agree with that criticism, but like I do see where people are coming with this. And it's honestly, I really think one day I'm going to make a recommendation video that's all books that made me feel really stupid and I loved every minute of it, and this would be on there. Speaking of that kind of book, the final 4-star that I read this month was Catherine House. So this has been making its rounds, and it's a dark academia book that, like, whatever. If you don't know what it's about by now, I'm certainly not going to be the person that can explain it to you. I actually put this on my TBR sometime last year, way before it got popular, based solely on the fact that it's about a small liberal arts college in rural Pennsylvania. And I went to a small liberal arts college in rural Pennsylvania. I was even in a secret society, sort of. Anyway, so like that's why I wanted to read this. I didn't know anything about what it was about until people started talking about it on BookTube. I just was interested in that idea. And honestly, my favorite parts were the things that fit that vibe. It was the stuff that was about the insane amount of pressure that goes on being in that kind of school, both the ways it was portrayed literally and the ways it was portrayed more figuratively were probably my favorite parts of this book. And honestly, I could sit here and make analogies one-to-one, perfect carbon copies of people I knew in college. Like, what's the main character's one friend? I don't know, my roommate in college fits one of those. One of my best friends fits one of those characters so well. Like Bunny, a friend I went to college with, fits her to a T. So I really, really got attached to it in a way of like, I've been there, I know that feeling. And it made me feel stupid. I had no idea what was happening and I loved it. So I love that kind of book. The thing that kept me from keeping this from a 4-star was just that I think it was just a little too plotless for my taste. I like a little more plot to my story. I mean, time passed, but there wasn't any conflict, and that kind of drew me out of that. And that's it. So enjoy some of my up-to-date stats so far. I will go over my stats in detail towards the end of the year. I'm going to do a December and stats wrap-up. So you can wait for that. These are some of the books. Oh, spines out. These were some of the books that I read this trimester. And that's it. Okay.